It was the summer of 1921 in Paris, France, and the city was abuzz at the news that one of the city's most well-known writers and wealthy socialites was facing trial for the gruesome murder of her husband, one Charles Bessarabo. Madame Bessarabo, better known by her pen name as Hera Mertel, was a writer, a playwright, mystic, militant feminist, and French socialite, writing for multiple magazines and even successfully starting one of her own, the Militant. Born Marie-Louise Victorine Bessarabo on October the 24th, 1868, in Lyon, France, she was an only child of a wealthy silk merchant. As a young girl, she attended a convent where she received her education. It was during these formative years that she developed her love of poetry, reading, and writing. After she finished her education, her father's business fell on hard times, forcing Marie to join her father in the silk importing business. Eventually, the situation improved, enabling them to leave Lyon, and in 1892, at the age of 26, Marie and her father relocated to Mexico. In Mexico, they were hoping to establish connections with the purchasing of silks and various fabrics to be later sold in France. Once in Mexico, Marie met Pierre-Paul Antoine Jacques, a trader from the Ube Valley. Despite Paul being 20 years her senior, the pair were eventually married and returned to France. Here, Marie gave birth to a daughter, Paulette. After some years, Marie grew decidedly tired of her husband. For years, she took on young lovers without any attempt to conceal the affairs. Paul never seemed to mind, and he continued to supply her with money, jewels, and all the finer things in life. One evening, in January 1914, she ordered the maid to take a tureen of soup to her husband, who was working late in his study. The maid saw her slip a white powder in the soup and said to her master, "I hope you like the flavoring that Madame put into your soup." Paul didn't eat, and instead had a portion of it analyzed by a chemist. It contained a lethal poison. Not wanting a scandal, he foolishly considered that it was done out of anger and would likely not happen again. He admitted to friends that he would never understand the dark corners of her mind. Then, on March the 5th, 1914, Paul was found with a bullet wound to the head. He had died of an apparent suicide. The police found him slumped over in a chair in his study with a revolver at his feet. During the subsequent police investigation, Marie appeared devastated by her husband's loss. The police deemed it suicide, and the case was closed. After her husband's passing, Marie, accompanied by her now 11-year-old daughter, took off for Mexico to attend her late husband's business affairs. While there, she met a mysterious, handsome man named Ishmael Jacob Providence Weissman, a commissioner born in Romania who went by the name Charles Bessarabo. He proposed marriage to the aging and vain Marie. Despite Paulette's distinct dislike for the man, Marie promptly accepted, and they returned to Paris in 1916. Much as Paul had done before him, Charles tolerated the fact that she still had young lovers on the side and continued to provide his wife with whatever cash she required. Moving into luxurious quarters, Marie set up her new literary salon, inviting certain males into private conference. Along with a multitude of lovers, she also indulged in drug use, becoming particularly fond of hashish. Perhaps it was Marie's extravagant lifestyle, her flippant attitude when it came to her many affairs, or it was just her disregard towards Charles. Whatever the reason, she became extremely vile-tempered toward her husband. They quarreled constantly, sometimes over the slightest difference of opinion. One evening, Charles awoke to find his wife's fingers firmly wrapped around his neck. After some struggle, Charles managed to knock Marie to the floor, where she explained that she wasn't sure what had come over her. In another incident, Marie became enraged and fired multiple shots at her husband. Fortunately for him, she missed with every shot. It was during this turbulent time of their marriage that Charles tried to leave Marie. It is believed that she stumbled upon his illegal source of income and threatened to blackmail him if he left her. Reluctantly, he stayed put. Charles, seeking some companionship, began an affair of his own. He met with her secretary multiple times at his villa in Montmorency. This may have been too much for Marie to bear, so on July 31st, 1920, mother and daughter called for a cab with 2 large trunks in tow, with one of them containing the body of Charles Bessarabo himself. After several days of his being missing, a startling message was brought to the police by the chauffeur of the missing man. My master told me that if ever he was missing, I was to come to you and accuse my wife and stepdaughter of foul play. Once the police were made aware that Madame Bessarabo could be a person of interest, they put her under constant surveillance, and from certain inquiries it was discovered that soon after the date of his disappearance, Madame Bessarabo and Paulette drove off one day with 2 large trunks in a cab. One of these trunks was traced to Nancy railway station. There it was found in a cloakroom with a label marked, "To be left until called for." The writing was that of Madame Bessarabo. Madame Bessarabo and Paulette were arrested. She claimed that during an argument her husband had attempted to strangle her. In desperation, she clutched a revolver in an attempt to frighten him, fired a shot which inadvertently struck him in the right temple. It was a great story, but no one believed it. When the trunk was located, it was noted that a pool of blood had collected on the cement floor beneath the trunk. When opened, it revealed a gruesome sight. Wrapped in a raincoat was a man's naked body, folded in 2, ankles strapped to neck, tightly packed and secured with rope. With all the mounting evidence, the trial for the murder of Charles Bessarabo finally began on February the 15th, 1921. The prosecution showed that Madame Bessarabo had forged her husband's name to a power of attorney, authorizing her to collect 600,000 francs due to him in Mexico. For 2 weeks, they reportedly called the daughter to the stand and wrestled to shake the truth from her. Thanks due in part to her highly renowned and skilled attorney, Vincent de Moro-Giafferi. Only a confession from either Marie or Paulette would be enough to convict Madame Bessarabo. When Paulette was on the stand, she appeared to speak and answer under the hypnotic control of her dominating mother. At the very end of the trial, as the prosecution summed up, Paulette, who had remained silent throughout the trial, jumped to her feet and yelled, "The truth! I must tell the truth!" The court allowed her to testify. She said she heard a shot on the night of July 31st, 1920, and with unspeakable agony as her own daughter's testimony was being used against her with deadly effect. Many spectators wept with sympathy for her. It was the daughter's confession that caused the jury to bring in a verdict of guilty. The jury believed the murder to be premeditated, but felt that a death sentence to be improper. Marie admitted her motive was jealousy for Charles's infidelity, along with a little added incentive of 600,000 francs. Paulette was acquitted and walked out of court a free woman. Marie was convicted of murder and sentenced to 20 years in prison. At the age of 62, Madame Bessarabo died of a heart attack. She died in prison and was buried in Saint-Paul-sur-Oubet, France, right beside her first husband, the husband that in all likelihood she murdered as well.